Welcome back to the deep dive. We are here to take that stack of sources, all those articles and notes, and distill them into the kind of nuanced understanding you need to be truly articulate. And today we are immersing ourselves in a topic that is, it's globally understood, but it's also profoundly complex.
It really is. We're talking about the weekend.
The weekend, just 2 days, right? Saturday and Sunday?
It seems so simple on the surface, doesn't it? But it carries this immense cultural and psychological weight.
Right.
So our mission today is really to deconstruct this almost sacred 48-hour window.
Okay.
We're going to try and move beyond just simple time tracking to analyze, the sociolinguistics of leisure, the nuanced social etiquette around it, and the deep underlying philosophy of work-life balance that the sources really get into.
Let's unpack that, because it's absolutely fascinating to me how this single predictable break functions as the primary pressure valve for modern life.
That's a great way to put it, a pressure valve.
It's the defining pause, the mandatory moment of respite. It's the emotional, the temporal. It's the punctuation mark at the end of every work week.
It is.
And we assign so much anticipation, so much hope to those 2 days that the expectation itself can sometimes feel, overwhelming.
And that's precisely why this deep dive is so necessary. The anticipation itself creates a kind of a performance pressure.
The performance pressure.
Yeah, this expectation that those 48 hours must be optimized or productive or, wildly entertaining.
Right, you have to have a good weekend to report back on.
Exactly. And our source material argues that a key to well-being is understanding the mechanics of the weekend. Not just how to spend it, but how to talk about it, how to manage its demands, and crucially, how to protect it from intrusion.
So our goal here is ambitious. We want to equip you, our listener, with the insight to articulate your leisure time with real sophistication and intention. We're aiming for those aha moments that connect the dots between, your personal well-being and the broader societal structure of work and rest.
And we begin, naturally, with the most common ritual of the work week.
The language.
The language we use to signal the transition to freedom. Indeed. Let's start with the sociolinguistics of the weekend, focusing specifically on what's known as phatic communication.
Which, we all know this. It begins every Friday afternoon, maybe even Thursday, with that one ubiquitous question.
Right, yeah.
What are you doing this weekend?
It's the universal sign-off.
The linguistic gateway to the next 48 hours.
And what's crucial here for our understanding is that the question is rarely, genuinely, a demand for a detailed itinerary.
Right.
Our sources correctly define this exchange as phatic communication. And this term, it describes language whose primary function is social, not informational.
Okay, so it's a social lubricant.
A vital social lubricant, yes.
Yeah.
Used purely to signal rapport, to acknowledge the other person's presence, and to reinforce that communal bond of the approaching break.
So it's structurally equivalent to asking, how are you?
Exactly. You don't actually require a full medical history in response.
That distinction immediately relieves an enormous amount of conversational pressure. A colleague asks about plans, and what they're really doing is signaling connection, maintaining professional rapport.
Yes.
They're not performing an investigative audit of my schedule.
Not at all.
But how do we distinguish a sincere inquiry from a friend, for example, from this sort of formalized social ritual? Because the risk is answering a phatic question with a sincere, 2-minute narrative about your intentions to alphabetize your spice rack.
That's a great point, and the sources offer a simple behavioral distinction.
Okay.
Phatic communication is defined by the speaker's low expectation of a detailed reply, and it's often accompanied by nonverbal cues.
Like what?
Well, if your colleague asks the question while they're already turning away or maintaining eye contact for less than 2 seconds or shifting their weight toward the exit.
The communication is phatic?
The communication is phatic. The expected reply is minimal and positive.
Whereas a sincere inquiry
is marked by a pause, by focused eye contact, and usually a follow-up question or maybe an offer of their own plans. The source material really emphasizes that reading these nonverbal cues is essential to responding appropriately.
So understanding the context saves us from oversharing. But even with that knowledge, the question still presents a pretty significant social challenge, particularly if the respondent has, as the source materials delicately put it, zero plans.
Zero plans.
In our, achievement-oriented culture, admitting you plan to do absolutely nothing can sometimes feel While underwhelming, it might even suggest a lack of social desirability or activity, which is a really odd cultural expectation we have to navigate.
It speaks to the deeply ingrained hustle culture mentality
Sure.
that often creeps into our leisure time. We feel compelled to justify our rest by dressing it up as productivity or, exciting social engagements. However, the sources argue that genuine conversational sophistication lies in embracing the art of doing nothing and owning that choice through intentional language.
Okay, so instead of shrinking the answer down to a weak, well, nothing much, we elevate the phrasing.
Exactly.
What are the specific vocabulary items the source provides to embrace this, domestic sanctuary without sounding dull?
We want language that suggests relaxation without implying boredom. And a great starting point is, I'm planning a low-key weekend.
Low-key weekend, I like that.
It conveys an intention toward quiet rest. Or, alternatively, and this is perhaps a bit more formal, you might use the excellent shorthand, I'm looking forward to some much-needed R&R.
Rest and recuperation. It's instantly understandable, and it carries a sort of historical gravitas. It was often used in military contexts, right?
It was.
And it signals clearly that you're prioritizing self-care. It carries a sense of intention, even if that intention is simply to turn off your brain and reboot your system.
Precisely. It sounds so much more sophisticated than just saying, I'm exhausted and I intend to vegetate.
Yeah, it really does.
And this linguistic finesse continues through the full cycle of the weekend. We move from the Friday inquiry to the Monday retrospective.
How was your weekend? The Monday gauntlet.
The Monday gauntlet. And here, the sources suggest the goal shifts again. It's less about conveying facts and more about performing brief, positive reciprocity.
So on Monday, you have to signal that you are refreshed, ready to re-engage, and that you have successfully utilized your break time.
That is the essential social contract. Your response manages social perception. Even if you spent the entire weekend in a state of inertia, that delightful, static state of deep rest.
Inertia, I love that.
You must use a euphemism that signals psychological benefit and restoration. You need to convey that the time off was effective.
So what's the top recommendation for achieving that signal of efficacy? What do we say?
The primary recommended phrasing is, it was incredibly restorative.
Restorative.
It's a powerful phrase because it implies that the break successfully achieved its function. You have been restored to full working capacity. It's proactive, it's professional, and it's far superior to simply stating, I did nothing, or even, it was fine.
I hadn't really considered the transactional cost of that linguistic choice. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this language use is actually a highly effective way of managing our professional facade.
What do you mean?
Well, we convey professionalism not just through the quantity of our work, but through how we discuss our ability to recover, to maintain our energy, and to re-engage without dragging the weight of the previous week into Monday morning.
That's a brilliant insight. It's a form of emotional regulation through communication. The sociolinguistics of the weekend are fundamentally about managing energy and expectations, both your own and those of your colleagues.
Right.
Moving beyond the language of obligation and into the language of intentional recovery is the critical first step to mastering the concept of leisure.
That sets a really strong foundation. So we've mastered the conversational rituals around the weekend. But what about the content of our downtime itself? Let's pivot. We're moving into section 2, the typology of leisure, where the source provides some phenomenal vocabulary for elevating how we discuss the activities themselves.
Yes. When we talk about leisure activities, we often rely on these highly reductive, generic descriptions. The source material pushes us to incorporate nuance, starting with one of the most common weekend diversions, cinematic pursuits.
Right. If you spend 3 hours in a darkened theater, you've seen a film. Simple. But how do we move beyond simple one-word genres like funny or scary and communicate a deeper, more specific appreciation of the medium?
This is where we need to elevate the vocabulary. Take comedy, for instance. You aren't just watching a comedy, which is far too broad.
Okay.
Instead, you might specify that you were in the mood for a satire.
Satire.
Which communicates a preference for wit, intelligence, and social commentary humor that's derived from critiquing institutions.
And satire is distinct from, say, a physical comedy or a romantic comedy. But the source introduces another wrinkle here, the dark comedy.
A dark comedy is distinct because it signals a preference for humor that engages with taboo, morbid, or deeply serious subjects. It forces the audience to grapple with uncomfortable truths while still eliciting a laugh.
Right. You've instantly communicated a layer of intellectual sophistication and a willingness to confront complexity.
Absolutely. That distinction changes the whole tenor of the conversation you have afterwards.
For sure. Now let's consider action films. We've all seen them, but how do we describe the ones that truly stand out in a way that captures their production value?
Well, if you're describing a big-budget tentpole film designed for maximal impact, you might specify that you are seeking a high-octane blockbuster.
High-octane blockbuster, that's good.
That phrasing conveys massive production values, nonstop energy, spectacle. Conversely, if the focus was more on intensity and sensory impact, something maybe less CGI-heavy but deeply gripping, you might describe it as a visceral thrill ride.
Visceral thrill ride, that's excellent.
Yeah.
It communicates both the genre and the intended emotional impact, connecting the action directly to your senses.
It does.
And for those of us seeking something, slower, more focused on human connection.
If you prefer series films, you're looking for specific thematic elements. You might seek a poignant drama, which implies the film evoked deep feeling, sadness, or sensitivity regarding a difficult subject.
Okay.
Or, if the plot is secondary to the growth of the central figure, you're looking for a character study.
Okay.
That tells the listener the film's strength lies in the psychological depth and development of the protagonist, rather than complicated plot mechanics or special effects.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me, because the sources point out that the logistics of these cinematic pursuits are themselves a deep cultural ritual.
Oh, yes.
The language around just securing the experience has evolved past simple transactions.
It has. We no longer just buy tickets and hope for the best, especially in anticipation of a high-octane blockbuster. We secure seats in advance to mitigate the very real modern risk of disappointment. This preparation is part of the ritual. It shows intentionality and respect for the time commitment.
And then there is the elephant in the room, the cultural trope of the concession stand. The source highlights the exorbitant prices of popcorn as a crucial, almost painful part of the experience.
That's the accepted sacrifice, isn't it? We know we're paying far above the market rate for soda and popcorn, but it's viewed as a necessary indulgence to complete the cinematic experience.
A necessary indulgence.
It's not just food consumption. It's part of the theater's ambiance, a traditional anchor point for the ritual. The transactional cost, though high, is considered a psychological prerequisite for fully relaxing into the theater environment.
That's a powerful idea. The cost of admission isn't just the ticket, it's the willingness to submit to the financial and social expectations of the location. But sometimes the cost of external leisure, be it financial or social, it pales in comparison to the immense gravitational pull of one's own home. And this brings us to the growing and, I think, necessary trend of JOMO.
JOMO, the joy of missing out. This is a deliberate, conscious counter-narrative to the relentless pressure of FOMO, the fear of missing out.
Right.
JOMO prioritizes personal space, domestic tranquility, and the profound value of not having external obligations. It's a statement of autonomy over one's time.
And the domestic weekend ideal is defined in the source as cocooning. Tell us more about what that entails and, crucially, how we describe it with the desired finesse.
Cocooning is the strategic, intentional withdrawal from the external, obligation-driven world. And when we are successfully cocooning, we aren't just watching TV to simply kill time or fill silence.
There's really something more.
We are instead binge-watching a compelling narrative arc on a streaming platform.
A compelling narrative arc.
This specific phrasing acknowledges the complex, structured, and serialized nature of modern episodic storytelling. It treats the consumption not as simple distraction, but as an act of intellectual and emotional engagement with the lengthy, structured narrative.
It acknowledges the depth that streaming services now demand. I mean, we aren't just watching simple television anymore. We are tracking complex character development, multiple timelines, thematic weight across dozens of hours.
Precisely. And for those who prefer the printed word,
the bibliophiles.
The language is equally evocative. The recommended phrasing is curling up and getting engrossed in literature. Curling up suggests physical comfort, sanctuary, and security. You are physically settling in. Engrossed indicates a deep state of mental immersion and focus, where the external world, including those porous boundaries we'll discuss, fades away entirely.
So it's high-quality, restorative attention dedicated entirely to the text.
Yes.
The weekend isn't solely reserved for passive absorption, though. It's also the prime opportunity for what the source material labels productive leisure or, domestic administration.
Right, the chores.
This is where we need to apply our linguistic shift most rigorously, moving away from that unpleasant connotation of chores.
Absolutely. Chores feel mandatory, they're often tedious, and they're associated with a low-status necessity. When we elevate the language, we fundamentally change the perception of the activity.
So we're no longer just cleaning.
We are engaging in decluttering, which implies removing unnecessary complexity and visual noise.
Okay.
We're organizing, which implies creating sustainable systems for the future. And most poetically, we are restoring order to our living environment.
Restoring order. That immediately imbues the act with a sense of fighting entropy and asserting control rather than just scrubbing a bathtub. It transforms the act from drudgery into a function of essential maintenance.
And this is why the feeling associated with this productivity is described as surprisingly cathartic. Catharsis is the process of releasing strong or repressed emotions. When we clean, we are physically and visually asserting control over a small, tangible slice of the world. And that translates directly to psychological relief.
So tidying the physical space often feels like clearing the mental clutter.
Which is a surprisingly profound form of self-directed therapy.
So conquering that mountain of clean laundry or finally organizing the garage is not just a duty, it's an active step toward improving one's mental hygiene. It's incredibly restorative, which connects back to the original purpose of the break.
The connection is flawless. And the final, highly elevated form of domestic leisure detailed in the source is culinary pursuits.
The weekend kitchen takeover. This moves us entirely past the necessity of preparing quick meals and into the realm of passion.
Indeed. We frame weekend cooking as elaborate gastronomy. This is distinct from weeknight cooking because it involves experimenting with complex recipes, specialized techniques, or preparation methods.
Like what?
Like smoking, baking a complicated pastry, or tackling a multi-course dinner's things that are simply too time-consuming or demanding for a standard weekday evening.
The implication is that we are treating cooking not as a necessary logistical task, which is what it is during the week, but as a hobby, a performance, or an artistic endeavor.
Yes.
We are engaging our fine motor skills, our creativity, and our patience outside the professional sphere.
And that intentional dedication of time is the key difference. The joy is derived not just from the finished product, the sustenance, but from the extended process itself.
Right.
The source materials also touch on the social function here. This type of cooking is often preparation for hosting, which is itself a weekend ritual. It's the intentional creation of a convivial atmosphere where the focus shifts from self-restoration to nurturing social bonds through shared experience.
That makes perfect sense. Whether we are engrossed in literature or meticulously caramelizing onions, the common denominator is intentional, deep engagement.
Exactly.
We've covered how we speak about and spend the solitary domestic weekend, but what happens when we venture out into the world and introduce other people? Let's transition now to Section 3, the etiquette of social engagement. Navigating social interaction requires enormous finesse, especially when you're initiating, accepting, or declining plans.
Social interaction, particularly around leisure time, operates on a complex, often unspoken set of rules designed to maintain cordiality and avoid putting others in an awkward position.
And the initial invitation, as you noted, requires immense finesse to avoid being presumptuous or demanding.
It does.
What's the danger of the overly blunt approach, like, do you want to hang out Saturday?
It creates social vulnerability. It places the burden entirely on the recipient to say yes, or to construct a believable excuse for saying no.
I see.
It lacks respect for the recipient's likely existing commitments or priorities. It sort of suggests that their time is readily available and requires little persuasion.
So we need softer approaches that convey respect for their time and autonomy. We're aiming for a gentle test of availability.
The source offers some fantastic, sophisticated alternatives. First, using more tentative language. I was wondering if you'd be amenable to grabbing dinner.
Amenable.
Amenable is a wonderful, softer word that means willing to agree or easily persuaded. It gently tests the waters without assuming consent.
It shifts the tone from a demand to a conditional, polite proposal. It gives the recipient psychological space to evaluate the proposition. What's the second phrase?
The second is even more formal, perhaps better suited for professional acquaintances. Are you at liberty this Saturday?
At liberty.
At liberty beautifully implies freedom from constraint or obligation. It's a slightly formal idiom, which adds a layer of politeness and sophistication. It asks, do you possess the necessary free time and freedom from prior engagement to entertain this idea?
So it treats their time as a valuable, finite resource.
Which is exactly how we want to position the weekend.
Crucially, if you are the recipient of an invitation, the most vital social skill to master is the soft refusal. This is where so many people, terrified of confrontation or awkwardness, stumble.
Oh, absolutely.
A poorly executed refusal can inadvertently damage a relationship or lead to unnecessary follow-up pressure.
The soft refusal is essential because it maintains the integrity of the relationship even while declining the proposal. It requires a delicate balance. It must be polite, but it must also be firm enough to be unambiguously clear.
Ambiguity is the enemy.
Ambiguity is the enemy here, yes. It leads to nagging or repeated attempts to change your mind.
So give us the examples the source recommends for achieving this perfect, polite yet firm balance.
For a genuinely firm yet polite refusal when you are actually busy, the go-to phrase is, "I'd love to, but I'm afraid I'm already committed."
Already committed.
The word committed suggests a pre-existing non-negotiable obligation. It signals finality without requiring you to reveal the specifics of the obligation, which, after all, is part of your protected personal time.
That's a great example of intentional vagueness. And what if the commitment isn't time-based, but preference-based? The person proposes a 3-hour interpretive dance workshop, and you simply dislike the activity.
Then you rely on the well-known idiom, often paired with a smile. "It's not really my cup of tea."
Ah, a classic.
It is. It's excellent for declining an undesirable activity without being rude or judgmental about the activity itself. It frames the rejection as a simple matter of subjective personal preference, not a judgment on the proposer or their taste.
And a good soft refusal often includes an offer to do something else in the future, right?
Yes, that's crucial. It signals continued interest in the relationship, if not the current plan.
That is highly useful social ammunition. Now, let's assume the invitation is successfully initiated and accepted, and we're dining out, maybe at a bistro or a slightly formal restaurant. The protocol continues far beyond the invitation itself.
Dining protocol is just rife with practical and social expectations. The primary practical concern, especially if you're the organizer, is the aforementioned need for reservations.
Right.
In a busy urban environment, failing to secure a reservation is a failure of foresight and a lack of respect for everyone's time. It mitigates the risk of that highly unpleasant experience of waiting a guaranteed friction point.
And once seated, the focus shifts to the menu. The source encourages us to move past merely selecting food for nourishment, but instead seeking a culinary experience.
That phrase suggests a desired engagement beyond simple appetite. It means looking for dishes that display the chef's craft, searching for novel flavor combinations, unique preparations, or ingredients that are specific to the restaurant or the season.
So it's about viewing the act of eating as an appreciation of skilled artistry.
Exactly. It aligns with the elaborate gastronomy we discussed earlier.
And finally, the moment that can freeze any casual social gathering, bringing all conversation to a grinding halt when the bill arrives.
The moment of financial reckoning. This is where cultural norms are crucial. The source highlights the standard practice in many Anglosphere countries to manage this fraught moment, splitting of the bill, or the widely understood idiom, going Dutch.
I want to push back on this point a little because while going Dutch is standard practice, is it always truly equitable?
Go on.
I mean, what if one person only ordered a single glass of water and a salad, and another ordered 3 cocktails and the most expensive entree? Does going Dutch always ensure equity, or is it often just the most convenient, least awkward option for the waiter?
That's a valid and a necessary challenge. The sources do acknowledge that while the principle of going Dutch is equity, each person paying their way, the practice often prioritizes convenience over absolute fairness.
Right.
It is a negotiation between social ease and financial precision. The social acceptance of splitting the bill evenly reflects the value placed on frictionless interaction.
So what's the solution for true equity?
Well, for a truly equitable approach, the sources recommend preemptively using technological solutions, various apps, or even just tracking individual items on a shared note, if there are large discrepancies in ordering habits, precisely to avoid that slight friction that comes from uneven splitting.
So, whether we are establishing who is amenable to dinner or establishing how we will split the bill, the entire structure of weekend social engagement is designed around mitigating awkwardness and maintaining positive rapport.
It is social architecture designed for smooth, enjoyable interaction. But let's shift now to the deepest and most profound part of our discussion, moving away from language and etiquette and into the fundamental philosophy of how we approach this time.
Right. Section 4, The philosophy of intentionality and balance.
Yes.
This is where we address the psychological necessity of the weekend. And before we get to the modern challenges, we have to first establish the fundamental spectrum of leisure, what the source terms the dichotomy, active versus relaxing.
Most people oscillate between these two poles, and their chosen weekend activities reflect their current physiological and psychological needs. On the active side, these are individuals who seek invigoration or adrenaline.
So they're engaging their sympathetic nervous system through stimulation.
That's right.
These are the marathon runners, the hikers, the ones who engage in competitive sports activities that often require significant physical exertion and external engagement. They use the weekend to energize themselves through movement.
Seeking that natural dopamine and endorphin rush associated with strenuous activity.
And conversely, the relaxing end of the spectrum is defined by
Decompression. This is the conscious, intentional prioritization of rest, avoidance of stimulation, and activation of the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode.
So this is where our earlier discussion of cocooning and restorative activities fits seamlessly.
It does.
And the essential lesson, as the source points out, is not that one side is inherently superior to the other,
No, not at all.
but the absolute necessity of understanding one's own needs on the spectrum at any given moment. If you've spent the week highly sedentary and intellectually taxed, maybe you require invigoration.
And if you've spent the week physically exhausted in a fast-paced environment, you likely need deep decompression. The intentionality lies in matching the type of activity to the specific unmet need.
And a failure to do this means the weekend won't perform its core function.
Exactly. It won't be that restorative bulwark it was designed to be. You could spend a restless Sunday night feeling like you didn't actually rest, even if you were physically still.
Which brings us directly to the modern existential challenge of the weekend, the bulwark against burnout. This is perhaps the most profound point the sources address.
It is. We must first remember the history.
Yeah.
The two-day weekend is not an ancient human tradition. It's a relatively modern social contract, largely solidified in the early 20th century.
Pushed by labor movements and industrial leaders like Henry Ford.
Who realized a rested worker was a more productive worker. It was historically engineered as a bulwark against exhaustion, a structural mechanism designed specifically to prevent the physical and psychological depletion that we now call burnout.
So the weekend is a societal safety measure. But that safety measure is now under constant, sustained attack in the digital age due to the danger of porous boundaries.
That is the core problem. The smartphone effect means we carry our offices, our inboxes, our obligations literally in our pockets.
Yeah.
The devices designed for ultimate convenience have simultaneously engineered perpetual availability.
Yeah.
The boundaries between professional obligations and personal time are no longer structurally enforced. They must be mentally enforced.
And that constant low-level professional availability it's corrosive. If we fail to consciously unplug, if we keep one eye on the email notifications or the Slack messages, we aren't truly resting. We are functioning in a dangerous and draining state the source calls perpetual partial attention.
Perpetual partial attention is so draining because it never allows the cognitive resources, particularly the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision-making and focus, to fully stand down.
So your mental resources are constantly split.
Constantly split between the leisure activity and the anticipation of a professional demand. You are perpetually on standby.
That constant splitting leads to what researchers call decision fatigue, poor long-term memory formation during leisure, and a feeling of never truly having left the office. It negates the restorative function of the weekend entirely.
It does, because the necessary psychological distance is never achieved. The sources are clear. This state is the fast track to clinical burnout, characterized by cynicism, reduced professional efficacy, and deep emotional depletion.
The weekend must be a space for wholehearted attention.
Wholehearted attention, yes. Whether that attention is dedicated to an elaborate recipe, a book, or simply staring at the ceiling.
So what does this all mean for the listener? If the boundary is constantly being eroded by technology, how do we push back and preserve our mental sanity against this digital tide?
Establishing boundaries is paramount, and it requires active discipline, not passive hope. The sources recommend specific actions, designating specific hours as technology-free, consciously leaving the work laptop in a drawer.
Or just using the do not disturb functions with intentionality.
Exactly. It requires the conscious decision to say, I am unavailable, and to physically and mentally unplug. You must treat your leisure time with the same respect you treat a client deadline.
It's not just a philosophical preference, it's a non-negotiable requirement for psychological health in the modern hyper-connected world. Without that discipline, the weekend simply becomes a low-grade, 2-day extension of the work week.
Where you're always anticipating the next request. And that anticipation is the thief of rest. But let's move past mere survival and preservation. The weekend has a far higher function, one the source material beautifully defines as identity construction.
This is a truly philosophical shift. The weekend is not just a mechanism to recharge the employee. It is a critical opportunity to cultivate the facets of our personality, our interests, our skills that lie dormant during the week.
During the professional week, our identity is often constrained, right? It's defined by our role, our deliverables, our economic function. The weekend provides the psychological space necessary to step into other equally valid roles.
You are not just an employee.
You are a gardener, tending life, a musician creating sound, a parent who is fully present, or an intellectual pursuing knowledge for its own sake.
It's the essential time dedicated to building the self outside of our economic value. If you identify as an intellectual, that's when you finally get engrossed in the literature we discussed earlier.
Right.
If you are an artist, that's when you paint or compose. It's honoring those deeper facets of self that give life richness and prevent professional singularity, that feeling that your entire self-worth is tied to your job title.
That's the entire point. The freedom granted by the weekend allows for self-directed growth. If you are always defined by your professional function, then when the job changes or the project ends, your sense of self is severely jeopardized. The weekend allows for a multifaceted identity that is more resilient.
And the key takeaway, the fundamental philosophy that underpins the entire concept of a truly restorative and meaningful weekend, hinges on that single, powerful word.
Intentionality.
Intentionality.
Absolutely. You must own your time. A passively consumed weekend, one where you drift through activities without purpose, responding only to external stimuli or notifications, is far less restorative and meaningful than one where activities, whether they are elaborate gastronomy or deep decompression, are chosen with deliberate purpose.
That is the ultimate conclusion, isn't it? The difference between a refreshing weekend and a wasted one is not the activity, but the intention behind it.
Precisely. If we return to our initial mission, we aim to deconstruct this time and provide nuance, moving you, the listener, toward a more sophisticated articulation of your leisure.
And we've done so by examining the key linguistic shift required. Instead of just discussing resting, we now aim for the language of restoration and low-key recuperation signaling, both purpose and psychological renewal to the outside world.
And philosophically, the shift is away from just having fun and toward meaningful engagement, intentional activities that cultivate parts of the identity dormant during the work week, strengthening your overall selfhood.
We hope this deep dive has given you the vocabulary, the etiquette, and the philosophical framework necessary to discuss and approach your leisure time with greater sophistication and nuance. It's not just 2 days off. It's a curated, critical experience necessary for mental balance and identity construction.
So to leave you with a final provocative thought, building on this idea of identity construction and intentionality, if the weekend is truly about cultivating the facets of your personality that lie dormant during the work week, what is one non-work related aspect of yourself, that gardener, that musician, that intellectual, that you could begin to cultivate this coming weekend?
And more importantly, given the need for boundaries, what specific small action will you take to honor that intention? Will you consciously unplug the work phone for 4 solid hours? Will you secure ingredients for a specific elaborate gastronomy project? Will you set aside 1 hour with the intention of being completely engrossed in literature and protect that hour fiercely?
Own your time and own your intention. That is the ultimate mastery of the weekend.
Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We look forward to diving into the next stack of sources with you soon.
Until next time, maintain your boundaries and prioritize intentionality in everything you do.
Goodbye.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. This is a show where we give you that advanced knowledge you're looking for, but, without you having to do all the foundational research yourself.
That's the goal.
And today, we've gone through a whole stack of sources that, frankly, challenge the way most of us think about our time off.
They really do.
We're trying to move beyond just the superficial. The simple list of, I went hiking, then I had dinner. We're going deep into the sociology, the psychology, and all the sort of hidden rules that really define our 2 days of freedom.
Indeed. And our mission today is really to give you, the listener, a much more advanced way of understanding these modern weekend rituals. We're going to analyze the specific etiquette, the psychological side of it all, and the subtle, often invisible social structure that hold the whole thing together.
It's fascinating because I think most people see the weekend as just, either total chaos or total relaxation.
Right, one or the other.
But what these sources show is that it's actually this highly curated, super organized, and almost high-stakes psychological experience.
Yeah.
We put so much energy into our time off.
A huge emotional and cognitive investment, so we're going to distill insights on everything, from the rules of hosting a party to the science of getting a reset out in nature, and then finally, how to manage that feeling of dread on a Sunday night.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unpack this. We're jumping right into the heart of modern social life, the domestic sphere. We're not just talking about having friends over. We're talking about hosting as a deliberate, demanding act of curation.
And that distinction is so crucial. The sources are really meticulous about separating hanging out from true hosting.
What is that distinction exactly?
Well, if you're just hanging out, the responsibility for how things go is it's distributed. Everyone's equally responsible for the vibe.
Okay, that makes sense.
But hosting is active. It's a role, a pretty significant, almost directorial role, where the host becomes the architect, the curator of the guest's entire experience while they're in your space.
Wow, okay. So that totally reframes it. It means if you decide to host something, a dinner, drinks, whatever, you're basically signing an implicit social contract.
You are, and it's a contract that requires deliberate, high-level action. It's not enough to just be there in your own home. You are literally tasked with designing an immersive environment for other people.
An environment, right?
Absolutely. The sources call it an act of curation because the host is the one who dictates the flow, the comfort, the mood. You're responsible for setting the tone, and that goes way beyond just making sure everyone has a chair and something to drink.
So if the host is the architect, what are the actual building blocks, the design elements they have to control? Because we've all been to those parties where, the food was fine, the drinks were fine.
But the ambiance is off.
The ambiance was just wrong.
Yes.
And the sources say the host has to be meticulous about crafting that ambiance.
That's right. And these specific curation elements, they're all about controlling the senses. It's nonverbal communication that tells your guests, you're safe here, you can relax.
Okay, like what?
Well, take the visual landscape. Lighting, it's huge.
Right.
It means dimming those harsh overhead lights, the ones we associate with, offices, hospitals, high-pressure places.
The big light.
The big light, exactly. And instead, you use warmer accent lighting. And there's a psychological reason for this. Dimmer, warmer light fosters intimacy. It creates a sense of safety. We feel less exposed, and our sort of primitive brain reads that warm light as being safer, so we can lower our guard.
That's amazing. Just turning off one light sends this profound signal that you're entering a zone of relaxation. And then what about the auditory landscape? The music.
Oh, that's a huge one. A curated playlist isn't just background noise, it's a guide. It's the soundtrack for the social interaction you want to happen.
It sets the pace.
It sets the emotional baseline for the entire event. A good host picks music that matches the tempo they want. So for the beginning of a party, you might want some instrumental jazz or maybe some low-key acoustic stuff.
Something that doesn't get in the way of conversation.
Exactly. It facilitates one-on-one chats without competing for attention. Then maybe later, if you want the energy to build, you can introduce something with a faster tempo, a little funk or soul, to subtly signal that, hey, it's okay to stand up, move around, talk in bigger groups.
And the opposite is also true. A bad playlist can just kill the whole night.
It can absolutely derail an entire evening. If it's too loud or it's just a bunch of obscure deep cuts nobody knows, doesn't matter how good the food is, you've failed.
It's all about managing the guest's cognitive load, right? You want the atmosphere to support the conversation, not distract from it. But I think nothing tests a host's skills more than the food, the sustenance.
Oh, this is the modern minefield. This is where hosting requires some serious social agility.
Yes.
Our sources call it culinary diplomacy.
Culinary diplomacy, I love that.
Because catering to guests today means navigating this maze of different dietary needs. A generation ago, success was just about having enough food, abundance.
Right. A huge spread.
Today, the measure of success is specificity and inclusion.
And that list of requirements just keeps growing. I mean, you have widespread gluten sensitivities, and not just celiac disease, but people who just feel better avoiding it.
Right. Non-celiac gluten sensitivity is a huge consideration. Then you've got dedicated vegans, which means you need to know about separate prep spaces, cross-contamination.
And then the serious allergies. Nuts, shellfish, things that are actually dangerous.
Yeah.
A host suddenly has to be a private detective and a research chef all at once.
And that's where the diplomacy part is so key. The ultimate goal for the host is to handle all of this without making the guest feel like a burden.
That's the art of it.
It is. The burden of preparation has to stay with the host. If a vegetarian guest shows up and sees you've made a specific, thoughtful dish just for them and it's separate from the meat, that sends a powerful signal of respect and care.
I have to ask, though, does this intense pressure to curate everything perfectly, does it turn leisure into just more labor? Does it make hosting less joyful and more like a performance review?
That's a critical question. And yes, the sources definitely suggest there's a real tension there. The really good, high-functioning host learns to see the labor as part of the love. The effort itself is the signal of care.
But there's a tipping point.
There is. If the planning is managed poorly, the host's anxiety about their performance just ruins the experience for them. Successful hosts have systems. They have checklists. They make the complexity routine. The failure is when the host is so stressed out juggling everything that they can't actually relax and enjoy the people they invited over.
So hosting is this advanced skill set. It's logistics, it's psychology, it's culinary science, all just to create a safe, comfortable little social ecosystem for a few hours.
Okay, so now let's flip the script.
Yeah.
Because all of that effort from the host, it means nothing if the guest doesn't uphold their end of the bargain.
The reciprocal social contract.
Exactly. If the host is the architect, the guest has to be a respectful, engaged, and crucially timely inhabitant of that space.
Yeah.
And the very first rule of that contract is punctuality.
Punctuality is paramount. But the sources are pretty nuanced here. They acknowledge that, culturally, we still have this idea of being fashionably late.
We do.
What does that even mean anymore? What's the window for fashionably?
The sources are very precise on this. They define the acceptable window as approximately 10 minutes.
10 minutes, that's it.
That's it. It allows for a bit of traffic, a last-minute wardrobe issue, maybe stopping to buy a gift. But once you cross that 10-minute threshold, you go from fashionably late to just unacceptably tardy.
And why is that so bad?
Because it's deeply disrespectful to the host's planning. It can delay the meal. It interrupts the flow of conversation that's already started. It fundamentally ignores all the careful timing that went into the evening. You're basically saying your time is more important than everyone else's.
You're violating the architectural integrity of the evening.
You are. And that brings us to the second point of the guest's contract, which is the host gift, the token of appreciation.
The symbolic power of this is so often underestimated.
It's fascinating, sociologically. The sources are clear. The gift does not need to be expensive. It doesn't even really have to be useful. Its value is 100% symbolic.
It's a signal.
It is a required signal that explicitly says, I see and I value the effort you put into this. All that invisible labor.
It's the acknowledgement of that cognitive load we talked about. You're making the host's invisible work visible and tangible.
Precisely. And there's even a formula for a good gift. The sources give specific examples. A decent bottle of wine.
Something they can enjoy later, after everyone's gone.
Right. Or a bouquet of nice flowers, which immediately makes the space better without creating a new chore. Or, high-quality chocolates, a simple luxury. The key is that the gift is either consumable or it enhances the environment without creating long-term clutter or work for the host.
A bad gift, then, is something that makes the host do more work.
Exactly. Like an unpotted plant they now have to find a pot for, or some weird gadget they have to figure out where to store.
So the gift is about giving them a little moment of pleasure after the work of the party is done. A reward.
It is. And that leads to the final and maybe the highest level social skill for any guest. The one that truly shows you've mastered the art form.
The departure.
The art of leaving.
This is so important. How you leave can preserve the memory of the entire evening as a success in the host's mind. It's all about reading the room.
You absolutely have to be able to read the room. The biggest social sin is overstaying your welcome, forcing the host to stifle a yawn or start cleaning up around you.
So what are the cues? What should a guest be looking for?
Successful guests are always monitoring the energy. They're looking for nonverbal cues. The host might start clearing dishes with a little too much purpose and speed.
Right, the aggressive cleaning face.
Exactly. Or their posture might shift. They go from being relaxed and leaning back to being a bit stiffer, maybe leaning forward, ready for it to be over. A good guest has to pick up on that immediately.
It's interesting to contrast that with something like the Irish goodbye,
Yeah.
where you just sneak out. That avoids the awkwardness, but it feels like it fails the contract.
It fails because it doesn't honor the host. The graceful departure includes a brief, sincere thank you. You reinforce the value of what they created for you. And the ultimate goal, as the sources say, is to leave while the energy is still high.
Leave on a peak note.
Yes. If you leave then, the host remembers a great, engaging party. Not the last 30 minutes of strained, tired conversation. It's the final act of respecting the architecture they built.
Okay, that brings us full circle. We've navigated the whole intense social maze of the domestic sphere. We hosted, we were a good guest, we left on time. After all that social and cognitive work, the body and the mind are going to demand a serious countermeasure.
And that transition is key. You're shifting from this highly structured social performance to what is really necessary, psychological restoration. For a lot of high-functioning people, the weekend is about escape. And it's often a very specific escape from the sensory overload of the city, the urban sprawl.
An antidote to the office and the pressure of always being on, hashtag A, the antidote to sedentary existence.
Precisely.
And the sources framed this outdoor time in a very particular way. It's not just exercise or having an active weekend. The advanced idea here is reconnecting with the natural world. Why is that specific wording so important?
It's important because it defines the intent behind the activity. The goal isn't just to burn some calories. We are actively seeking a specific kind of physiological and mental outcome.
And that outcome is a response to our default state, right?
Yeah.
A sedentary, screen-bound life.
Exactly. Let's unpack what that default state does to us. Modern professional life often keeps our sympathetic nervous system in a state of chronic, low-grade arousal.
The fight or flight mode.
Right. But we're not fighting or fleeing, we're just sitting. We're getting bombarded with blue light from screens, processing information at high speed. Our bodies are primed to run from a tiger, but we're just stuck in a chair. So the outcome we're chasing in nature is what the sources call a physiological reset.
Okay, so what does a physiological reset actually mean? What's happening inside our bodies?
It means you're forcing a shift into the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode, and you do that by engaging your body and brain in ways that screens just don't. Things like hiking on rugged terrain or doing some kind of water sport.
So it's not just about moving your legs, it's more complex.
It was much more complex. When you're walking on uneven ground, you're constantly using what's called proprioception.
Proprioception.
It's your body's innate sense of its own position and movement. You have to constantly adjust your balance, watch your footing. This demands a huge amount of immediate physical focus. And that focus diverts your cognitive resources away from all the abstract stress from the week, the emails, the deadlines.
You can't worry about a spreadsheet when you're trying not to twist your ankle.
You literally can't. The physical data overwhelms the mental stress. And you get a similar effect from things like kayaking or climbing. You are actively recalibrating your nervous system by flooding it with non-stressful physical information. The result is a real, measurable reduction in stress and mental fatigue.
That really elevates the weekend hike from just a hobby into like an essential part of professional self-management.
That's a perfect way to put it. You're not just taking a nice walk, you are actively managing your internal chemistry through your environment. You're leveraging your body's own systems to fight the side effects of modern life.
And this leads us to a really fascinating concept the sources introduced to kind of scientifically validate all of this. Hashtag tag BB, the science of immersion, Shinrin-yoku.
It does. It formalizes this whole idea of restoration.
This is where the sociology meets the biology. The concept is the Japanese practice of Shinrin-yoku.
Which is usually translated as forest bathing.
It sounds so poetic. But what's the actual science here? What's the mechanism?
Well, Shinrin-yoku isn't just some nice spiritual idea. It's a research concept that's part of public health initiatives in Japan. And the core insight is that just being immersed in a forest atmosphere actively and measurably lowers stress hormones.
Measurably.
Yes, we're talking about objective, scientific data. Studies show reductions in cortisol, our main stress hormone, as well as lower blood pressure and a healthier heart rate variability.
Wow. What is the forest doing to us? Is it just that it's quiet?
It's more than just the quiet, though that definitely helps. The leading theory is that it has to do with something called phytoncides.
Phytoncides.
These are basically airborne organic compounds that trees and plants release to protect themselves from bugs and rot. They're a kind of essential oil. And when we walk through the forest and breathe them in, They trigger a biological response in us.
So we're breathing in the forest's immune system, and it's acting like a kind of therapy for us.
That's a great way to think about it. Research has shown that breathing in these compounds is linked to an increase in the number and the activity of our natural killer cells, or NK cells.
And those are?
A type of white blood cell that's crucial for our immune function. They help fight off infections and even tumors. So the act of forest bathing really validates this whole idea that the active weekend is about mental and immune system recalibration, not just burning calories.
So it's not just I went for a walk to clear my head. It's I engaged in intentional, measurable stress reduction to support my long-term health.
Exactly. The natural world becomes an essential tool in your high-stress management kit. It goes back to that theme of curation. The host curates a social experience, but the high-functioning person curates their own environment to get a specific physiological result.
Okay, so we've exerted ourselves, we've reset our cortisol levels in the forest. Now we have to transition back into the social world before the weekend officially ends. And for many people, especially in cities, that transition happens over one specific highly ritualized meal.
Yes, brunch. It's the perfect social and chronological anchor. It sits right in that sweet spot between the, pure physical escapism of Saturday and the psychological weight of Sunday evening.
It's become a sacred weekly event, hasn't it? Especially in cities where social calendars are so tight.
It has. The sources are clear that brunch has gone way beyond just being a meal. It's a non-negotiable weekly ritual, a pillar of the weekend structure.
Why do you think this one meal has gained so much cultural importance?
I think, in a word, it's latitude. Brunch is really the only meal that gives you a social and a temporal latitude that breakfast or dinner just don't.
What do you mean by latitude?
Well, the sources call it the decadent intersection of breakfast and lunch. It successfully merges the comforting simplicity of breakfast food pancakes, eggs, with the more robust and alcohol-friendly nature of lunch. It's designed to feel luxurious and completely unhurried.
And the duration is key. This isn't a quick bite. The ritual can last for hours.
2-3 hours sometimes, and it's almost always accompanied by very specific ritualized drinks.
The mimosas and the Bloody Marys.
Exactly. And those drinks are signals. They give you explicit social permission to indulge in the middle of the day, which most other meals don't. They signal that time has slowed down, that the normal rules are suspended. And all the coffee makes sure you can sustain that social energy for the whole time.
So what social functions does this meal actually serve? Why is it so necessary in our calendars?
It serves a few critical functions. First, it's a prime time for gossip and what you might call social mapping.
Social mapping.
Yeah, the setting is relaxed, the drinks are flowing, and there are no time constraints, so it's the perfect time to dissect in detail everything that happens socially during the week or the night before. It's a key bonding mechanism.
Okay, and second?
Second, it's the best time to debrief on the work week. Everyone's just come out of that high-pressure environment. Brunch is the safe space to download all that stress, analyze the office politics, and process it all before Monday starts again.
So it's like a group therapy session with Eggs Benedict.
That's basically it. And finally, it's just a moment for pure, intentional indulgence. The pressure is off. You're not a host curating a high-stakes dinner. You're not a guest worried about being on time. It's structured relaxation, a collective deep breath before the gravity of Sunday afternoon starts to set in.
The last gasp of carefree weekend living. And that transition from the indulgence of brunch to the psychological weight of late Sunday, that's maybe the most jarring part of the whole weekend cycle.
Which brings us to that universal phenomenon, the Sunday scaries. And for the high-functioning person, this isn't just a vague feeling. It's a real condition that you have to manage proactively. #A, anticipatory anxiety and melancholy.
We've all felt it, that sinking feeling, and it's so predictable. The sources pinpoint the timing to around 4 or 5.0 EPM on a Sunday.
Right around then.
It's that moment the light changes, the air gets a bit cooler, and you just can't deny that Monday is coming.
And while we call it the Sunday scaries or Sunday blues, psychologically, the sources define it more technically. It's a specific kind of anticipatory anxiety.
Meaning you're not anxious about the present moment.
Exactly. In the present moment, you're usually fine. You're comfortable, you're rested. Your anxiety is projected entirely onto a future event, Monday morning.
So the trigger isn't weekend exhaustion. It's the looming encroachment of work responsibilities.
It is. The melancholy comes from recognizing that immediate switch from autonomy to obligation. All weekend, you've been in charge of your own time. Sunday afternoon is when you realize that's about to end, and the contract of the work week is about to snap back into place.
And it can have physical symptoms too, right?
Oh, absolutely. A tightness in the chest, maybe some trouble sleeping on Sunday night, or just suddenly not being able to focus on anything fun.
I think the most interesting part of this is that it happens even to people who love their jobs, high achievers who are excited about the week.
That is the key insight. It's not necessarily about hating your job. It's about an aversion to the transition, the requirement to instantly shift gears from self-governance back to external schedules and responsibilities. It's a feeling of losing control. And for high-functioning people who are used to being in control, that loss feels acute.
You're grieving the temporary loss of your own personal sovereignty.
That's a very good way to put it.
So the goal isn't to pretend the anxiety doesn't exist. It's to manage that transition so it doesn't feel like a sudden crash. #B strategic preparation as mitigation.
Exactly. The high-functioning response isn't to just passively rest and hope it goes away. It's to mitigate the anxiety with what our sources call strategic preparation.
Okay.
You actively introduce structure and a sense of control into that anxiety-prone window on Sunday evening. You reclaim a sense of mastery over the week ahead.
So if the anxiety is caused by the unknowns of Monday morning, strategic preparation is about defining those unknowns. What are the key rituals here?
They're all about making Monday morning as frictionless as possible. The less you have to think about on Monday morning, the less anxiety you'll feel on Sunday night.
Okay, let's start with the big one, meal prepping.
Meal prepping is huge, and it's not just about health or saving money. In this context, it's about reducing decision fatigue on Monday. If your breakfast and lunch are already made.
That's two huge decisions you don't have to make when you're groggy.
Exactly. You wake up, and that's two barriers to starting your day that are already gone. That saves a ton of psychological capital.
And what about organizing the schedule for the week?
This might be the most effective strategy of all. On Sunday evening, you sit down, you look at your calendar, you clean up your computer desktop, and you decide on your top 3 priorities for Monday morning.
You're preempting the chaos.
You are defining the battlefield before the battle starts. This little ritual transforms Monday from a surprise attack into a known, manageable set of tasks. You go from feeling, what am I walking into, to, I know exactly where to start.
So you turn the anxiety of the unknown into the comfort of a to-do list.
Precisely. And then finally, the successful person will have some kind of calming ritual right before bed.
How is this different from just, watching TV to relax?
It's about the intentionality, and it's almost always a non-screen-based activity. Reading a physical book, doing some light stretching, maybe journaling for 5 minutes. The goal is to create a mental buffer between the freedom of the weekend and the structure of the week.
A wind-down period.
A proper wind-down. It forces your mind to slow down and consolidate the rest you got, instead of letting your anxiety about Monday spiral in those last few hours. You ease yourself into the new week instead of being jolted into it by an alarm clock.
So by front-loading all that organization on Sunday night, you're essentially buying yourself a few extra hours of calm and autonomy on Monday morning. #V. Conclusion and challenge for the learner.
And if we synthesize this whole journey, this whole weekend cycle, we can see it's not just a break. It's a complete, complex narrative. It's a microcosm of high-performance modern life. And it has 3 very clear phases.
The first is liberation. That's Friday evening, the moment you shed your obligations and your personal autonomy kicks in.
The second phase is immersion and play. That's your Saturday. It's characterized by that intense social engagement we talked about, the architecture of hosting, and also that deep sensory recalibration, ideally through that physiological reset in nature.
And then the final phase, recalibration, rest, and preparation. That's Sunday. Moving from the indulgence of brunch toward the strategic preparation you need to re-enter the work week smoothly.
It's the whole cycle. Recharge, reorganization, and readiness. And understanding the structure, the psychology, the social contracts, that's the mark of really advanced knowledge.
So that brings us to our challenge for you, the learner. We want you to take this new framework and apply it. Your new mission is to move beyond just superficial stories about your weekend.
When you're talking about your weekend with your friends or colleagues, don't just list what you did. That's just elementary reporting. We're aiming for sophisticated analysis.
Right. Articulate the depth of the experience. So instead of just saying, I had a dinner party, maybe describe the atmosphere you curated. Was it intimate? Was it a triumph of culinary diplomacy?
And instead of, I went hiking, Describe the tranquility you felt. Talk about the physiological reset you were aiming for. Maybe even mention the fight insides.
Why not?
And instead of just saying, I had the Sunday scaries, describe the onset of your anticipatory anxiety. Talk about the melancholy of those twilight hours. And then describe the strategic preparation ritual you used to mitigate it.
And the benefit of doing this is huge. Using this kind of vocabulary helps you understand your own life with more clarity, but it also elevates the conversations you have with other people. You stop just reporting on your life and you start analyzing it.
You become an active participant in the sociology of your own everyday life.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive, uncovering all the structure we take for granted.
We've covered a lot. The hidden contracts of hosting, the science of forest bathing, the mechanics of the Sunday scaries.
Thank you for joining us as we uncovered all the intentionality that's hidden inside our most precious time off.
We look forward to your next deep dive with us.
Goodbye, everyone. #tag outro.
So building on these concepts of curation and strategic preparation, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought for the week. If hosting a party is an act of meticulous curation and managing the Sunday scaries requires structured, strategic preparation, to what extent is our pursuit of weekend freedom itself becoming just another carefully managed project? Is our leisure becoming a deliberate performance rather than spontaneous restorative rest? Are we, in the end, working harder at our time off than we do at our jobs? Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take complex cultural shifts, stack up the source material, and give you the essential knowledge you need to feel completely well-informed.
Or in this case, maybe completely well-rested.
Exactly. Because today we are analyzing what is, I think, maybe the most contested period of the modern week.
Mm-hmm. The weekend.
The weekend. And this isn't just about, summarizing what people do on a Saturday or Sunday.
No, not at all. We are performing what you might call a cultural autopsy on how we choose to spend our time, and maybe more importantly, why we so often fail to truly recharge.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission for this deep dive is to really get into the modern evolution of leisure.
Right.
We're analyzing these really sharp, contrasting approaches to rest and productivity that I think define our current cultural moment.
It's real split.
It is. We're going to be dissecting the overwhelming rise of hustle culture.
Oh, yeah.
And then on the other side, the deliberate strategic planning that goes into the modern staycation.
And we'll try to synthesize these very different models for what it means to find genuine rest or stimulation.
Right. So we're moving well past the basic definitions here to really critique these major cultural shifts that are just transforming how we experience our downtime.
And so what here is, I think, fundamental for you listening. This dive is so crucial because it's about more than just personal preference.
It's way bigger than that.
It's about understanding how we define value. Is it monetary or is it mental?
Mm-hmm.
And it's about how these intense societal pressures affect our actual ability to recharge.
That's the key, the ability to do it.
Exactly. Because if we don't understand these powerful external forces that are pushing us toward constant output, toward making every single minute productive,
then we can't fight back.
We can't. We can't effectively choose the path that actually leads to genuine restoration. Gaining this comprehensive knowledge is all about identifying and really dismantling the architecture of modern exhaustion.
Which is so often self-imposed.
That's the tragedy of it.
That sets the stage perfectly, because we have to jump immediately into what the sources are flagging as the greatest threat to restorative leisure.
The big one.
The commodification of our downtime. We're analyzing toxic productivity, and we have to start with the side hustle.
The side hustle.
The side hustle has become, it's not just a common path anymore, is it? It's a truly pervasive cultural mandate.
A mandate, that's exactly the right word. And our sources are really clear that it's genuinely threatening the very existence of leisure as we once understood it.
Okay, so let's define the historical context here, because that really highlights just how much our relationship with our own free time has shifted, even just in the last decade.
The shift is fascinating, and it's all about the intentionality behind the activity itself.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, leisure was defined by its lack of expectation.
Exactly. Think back to what a hobby meant 20 or 30 years ago. Whether that was painting or, some amateur coding or fixing up old engines or baking.
Sure, anything.
It was simply a pastime. It was driven purely by what you might call intrinsic pleasure. You did it because the act itself was rewarding or soothing or stimulating.
And this is the key point. The moment that intrinsic pleasure faded, you just stopped.
You just stopped. There was no financial expectation tied to your enjoyment, and there was certainly no external audience demanding proof of your output.
And we would connect this to the bigger picture. That's the fundamental distinction between a hobby and a side hustle.
The pressure.
It's entirely the presence of that pressure toward monetization. The sources stress that today there's this immense, almost unavoidable societal pressure to monetize our downtime.
And it's not always about needing the money, right? That's what's so strange.
No, that's a huge part of it. I mean, the gig economy is a factor, of course, but this is a profound cultural mandate. It's this little voice that whispers that if you're good at something,
Or even just okay at it.
or even just competent at something, you are somehow morally or, economically obligated to turn it into a cash stream.
And this mandate is just supercharged by technology. We're not just talking about like driving for a rideshare service.
No.
We're talking about the soft hustles. The person who starts a drop shipping business on their lunch break. The person spending all of Saturday trying to optimize their crypto mining rig, or the gamer who realizes their hobby can be monetized if they just start streaming.
Right. Even our creative output is instantly digitized and immediately subject to commercial valuation. The moment the hobby crosses over into being a performance for an audience, the pressure begins.
That's a critical point. The core tension is that when a pastime becomes a hustle, the source of motivation just completely flips.
It inverts. It goes from internal satisfaction
To external validation and, well, financial reward.
and that flipping mechanism immediately introduces stress, performance metrics, deadlines, all the things we're trying to escape during the weekend.
All the architecture of our day job. Which leads directly to the core problem we need to talk about. The economics of leisure and this overwhelming, sometimes crippling sense of guilt that now defines the weekend for millions of people.
This phenomenon is a perfect definition of the commodification of leisure.
Yeah.
We feel this acute sense of guilt if our weekend isn't productive. And productive is, in quotes there, meaning quantifiable, commercial, or visibly optimized in some way.
And it's amplified, right, by social media.
Oh, massively. Everyone else's productivity is broadcast.
Yeah.
So if we see a friend launching a new venture and hosting a massive dinner party and running a marathon.
All before noon on Saturday.
Exactly. We internalize this idea that our quiet morning, just reading a book, is somehow a failure. We're falling behind.
The source material illustrates this pressure perfectly with some really, really relatable examples. Let's stick with the food one for a second.
Okay.
If you spend all Saturday baking this, excellent sourdough bread, which is an intrinsically satisfying, slow process.
It is.
People don't just compliment your skill anymore. The very next question is almost guaranteed to be, have you thought about setting up an Etsy shop?
Or you should sell that at the farmer's market. Every single time.
Every time.
And if you dedicate a few hours each week to, say, creative writing, the question isn't, are you enjoying the process?
Yeah.
It's, when are you publishing, or are you building a platform yet?
God, the platform.
And that shift in questioning is so insidious because it validates the activity only when it has a tangible commercial output. It literally places a price tag on your peace of mind.
And the consequence of that is it's devastating. The societal pressure transforms the weekend from a period of genuine rest, rejuvenation, free time,
into what it actually is.
what we have to accurately describe as a second shift of labor.
That's it. You clock out from 40 hours at your primary job, and then you immediately clock into another 10, maybe 20 hours on your leisure activity, which has now been assigned this commercial or self-improvement value.
And the problem isn't just the physical time you're putting in.
No, it's the mental time. It's the fact that the cognitive load never, ever switches off.
Okay, define cognitive load for us here.
So cognitive load, as the sources explore it, refers to the total amount of mental effort that's being used in your working memory at any given time.
Got it.
So when you are constantly thinking about pending commercial tasks, I need to finish these invoices, I need to package these products, I need to post this content to my platform, that mental administrative work actively prevents you from entering a state of true rest.
It's that psychological burden of unfinished tasks. I think the sources are sort of obliquely referencing something called the Zeigarnik effect.
Explain that.
It's the idea that we remember uncompleted tasks much, much better than completed ones. They just sit in our brain. So when your hobby becomes an uncompleted task, a pending shipment, an unpublished draft, your brain is constantly allocating energy to monitoring that status, which means you can't truly relax. That anxiety is just humming in the background, preventing the mental buffer from clearing.
That's a perfect way to put it. The cognitive machinery is still spinning, even if you're just lying on the couch.
Right.
And this is why you often feel so tired after a quote-unquote productive weekend. You did a lot of things, but nothing actually relieved that baseline internal pressure to output.
Here's where it gets really important for you listening, because we need a clear, universally recognized term for this whole phenomenon.
You can't fight an enemy you can't name.
Exactly.
So we have to introduce and define the sociological term for this: toxic productivity.
Okay.
And you can define it as the relentless inability to just be.
The inability to just be. Wow.
Yeah, it's the constant internal or external mandate that every single moment must be optimized for some kind of measurable output.
Whether that output is profit,
or self-improvement metrics like steps taken or Bix read, or social validation through likes and shares.
So what's fueling it?
It is fueled by this underlying anxiety that just whispers, if you aren't producing, you are somehow wasting your potential, or even worse, you're failing.
And it links directly to the fear of missing out, right? FOMO. If everyone else is visibly succeeding at optimizing their free time, you feel this intense pressure to join the output race.
You do. And the critical thinking required to critique this cultural shift is so essential for you, the learner. This is about questioning the base assumption that the most valuable thing you can do is sell something.
It's a huge assumption we all just seem to have accepted.
It is. And we need to model some language for resistance. When you are feeling this pressure, you have to be able to articulate it rather than just internalizing the stress and succumbing to the hustle.
So what do you say?
You can consciously say something like, I'm choosing to prioritize restoration over revenue this weekend.
I like that.
It acknowledges the societal pressure, but it asserts your personal control over the situation.
Okay, but I want to introduce a point of friction here, a challenge.
Go for it.
If the whole point of toxic productivity is optimization, isn't the idea of reclaiming my weekend for non-productive creativity just another form of optimization? You're just optimizing for mental health instead of money. So how do we make sure that even our resistance doesn't become another stressful checklist item?
That's a very sharp challenge, and it requires some nuance. The difference, I think, lies in the metric of success.
Okay.
If you're optimizing for health, the metrics are internal. It's about feeling less anxious, having clearer thought, mitigating burnout.
Right, things you feel, not things you can count.
Exactly. If you're optimizing for the hustle, the metrics are external dollars earned, followers gained, tasks checked off a list. The true resistance is realizing that some activities have no external success metric at all.
And that's okay.
And that is perfectly fine. It's the radical act of engaging in play purely for the sake of the visceral joy it provides.
That verb you used before, reclaiming, feels really potent. It positions the act of rest not as a passive failure like, oh, I didn't do anything this weekend, but as an active, deliberate choice against this relentless societal imperative.
Right. It challenges the inherent contradiction of finding value only through commerce.
Absolutely.
Because if the only value we assign to an activity is its market price, then our mental and emotional restoration, which has no immediate market price, is completely devalued.
It's worthless in that system.
It's worthless. And toxic productivity ensures the boundaries between work and life are just forever blurred.
Yeah.
You can only mitigate burnout if you actively, intentionally draw those boundaries yourself.
That is the ultimate goal, isn't it? Mitigating burnout by defining what your time is for.
Yes.
So, okay, let's assume we have successfully resisted the side hustle pressure. We fought it off. We still have that space we've reclaimed.
The empty weekend.
The empty weekend. And we need to look at strategic weekend planning now and defining intentional rest because, as we all know, simply staying home often just doesn't cut it.
No, it really does.
So the first strategic model we need to unpack, which has become incredibly popular as a form of defined leisure, is the staycation.
The staycation.
It's a perfect example of a portmanteau, a blended word of stay and vacation. But the true definition is so essential, and it requires, I think, tremendous discipline from you, the listener.
That distinction is paramount, and it's so often misunderstood. Our source material really stresses that a staycation is not simply staying home and hoping for the best.
Right. That's a recipe for disaster.
It is. It implies deep structural intent. The key concept is that you are physically at home, you're surrounded by the familiar objects of your daily life, but mentally, you are on holiday.
You have to invoke the mindset of a traveler in your own house.
That's it. And this is where that required discipline comes in, because the home is inherently associated with labor.
Oh, yeah. The domestic environment is a constant screaming reminder of chores.
So we need to detail the activities that are strictly prohibited on a successful staycation. If you were truly away at some expensive resort or exploring a new city, would you be doing them?
The answer is no.
The answer is no. Precisely. Therefore, a successful staycation necessitates declaring a moratorium on domestic drudgery.
What's in the banned list?
Doing laundry, tackling the overflowing inbox, scheduling home maintenance, paying bills, mowing the lawn, all of it is strictly forbidden.
Why? What's the psychological reasoning?
The psychological trigger for a holiday state is novelty and the absence of routine responsibility. You must treat your home like a temporary, luxurious, maintenance-free hotel rather than a list of chores waiting to be completed.
So you have to set up actual barriers, physical and digital.
You have to.
Maybe you put your work laptop in a closet, you turn off notifications on your work phone, and this is key, you set up forbidden zones.
Forbidden zones, I like that.
Like, maybe the home office is completely off limits for 48 hours. Or maybe you eat all your meals outside on the balcony just to force a break from the kitchen's association with weekday meal prep.
The discipline required is to ignore that visible to-do list entirely and shift the focus to activities that induce novelty and exploration.
So what are those intended activities?
They're usually things you would do on a proper vacation, but just localized. You might explore your own city like a tourist.
Visiting that quirky museum you always skip.
Exactly, or trying the highly rated neighborhood bakery you never go to because the weekday commute takes you in the opposite direction.
It's the exploration of the known environment as if it were unknown, forcing yourself to see your city with fresh eyes.
And crucially, booking external structured activities.
Like a massage or a ticket to a show.
Right, things that force external structure and pampering. Because without those external bookings that impose a schedule, the staycation just collapses back into a lazy weekend.
And the mental load, the chores, they all start creeping back in.
They do, absolutely. Yeah. The beauty of the staycation is that it manages to eliminate the major stressor of travel logistics.
Which brings us neatly to the alternative.
The mini break. Or the weekend getaway.
Ah, the siren call of the quick escape. The change of scenery that promises immediate relief.
And this alternative model defines itself entirely by that change of scenery. A mini break usually involves a short-haul flight or a long drive to the countryside.
And it promises immediate decompression through novelty and physical distance.
Right. It's driven by this deeply ingrained belief that you have to physically distance yourself from your environment to truly rest. The idea that home is inherently tainted by responsibility.
But here's the primary critique, and I think everyone listening who has attempted a 2-day trip will recognize this sinking feeling. The logistics can often induce far more stress than the trip actually relieves. It becomes an exercise in efficiency, not relaxation.
They absolutely can. And the source material touches on this critical concept of a low return on investment, or ROI, for your energy expenditure.
Let's break that down.
Okay, think about the administrative burden. For a 2-day trip, you might spend 3 hours just packing and preparing.
At least.
Then 4 hours driving or navigating airports, an hour checking in. And then you have to repeat that entire sequence in reverse 48 hours later when you're already exhausted.
So a huge percentage of your precious leisure time was just dedicated to the administrative burden of travel.
Exactly. The time cost is obvious, but let's talk about the psychological cost.
Okay.
It's not just the traffic. It's the logistical overhead, the stress of making sure the car is gassed up, the train is on time, the hotel reservation is correct.
But I remember to pack my phone charger.
Right. That constant low-grade anxiety of travel administration just eats away at the mental buffer the trip is supposed to be creating.
And we have to factor in the social media performance anxiety, which the sources call the experiential ROI.
The what?
The experiential return on investment. You haven't just spent money and time. You've created this expectation that this trip must yield beautiful, Instagrammable, restorative results.
So you feel obligated to maximize every moment.
You do. To see every landmark, to eat at every highly rated restaurant, just to prove to the world and to yourself that all that logistical stress was worth it.
And that feeling of obligation is the complete antithesis of leisure.
It's a killer. But let me challenge that for a second. If the mini break is so logistically fraught with peril, why do people still choose it?
It's a fair question.
Because for some people, the certainty of that physical separation outweighs the stress of travel. They know that if they stay home, they will inevitably drift toward the laundry pile.
So the physical boundary of a hotel room, despite the traffic, is the only boundary they actually trust.
It's the only one that works for them.
That's true. So the mini break guarantees a refreshing change of scenery, and it forces that separation, but it often sacrifices true restoration because of the energy you expend.
So comparing the two models really highlights this deep tension in modern leisure planning.
It does. Staycations eliminate travel stress, but require immense discipline to ignore the domestic environment.
While mini breaks guarantee novelty, but often come with this stressful logistical and performative cost.
So the strategic planner in you, the listener, has to weigh which form of stress. Is it mental discipline versus logistical headache and performance anxiety? Which one are you better suited to mitigate?
It's a choice between inner strength and creating an external barrier.
And that intentionality, whether you're staying or you're going, it has to be aimed at achieving a specific outcome. Which brings us to our final section, modeling the archetypal perfect weekend.
Because the sources show that the perfect answer really depends entirely on the kind of rest your specific mind requires.
It's deeply personal.
So if we accept that the weekend needs to be an intentional treatment plan for the deficiencies of the week,
Which we should.
let's detail the first model. This is the one that embraces quiet and depth. We can call this the solitude model, and it's defined by solitude and intellectual immersion.
This model is intentionally designed for restoration through deliberate withdrawal.
Withdrawal from what?
From the world. It's about recovering from constant social and professional stimulation by intentionally limiting sensory and social input. This is for the person whose week was just filled with meetings, negotiation, noise, and constant interaction.
The tempo here is key then. It's slow, it's deliberate.
Very. It is an intentional slowing down of the pace of life to allow your nervous system to just recalibrate.
So what does this look like hour by hour?
Well, it commences with a slow Saturday morning defined by the total absence of urgency.
So no alarm clock.
Absolutely no alarm clock. The body and the mind get to dictate the rhythm of waking, which allows your circadian rhythm to naturally reassert itself after a week of forced schedules.
And that slow pace continues into the afternoon.
It does, and this is where the intellectual immersion comes in. This model dedicates the afternoon to a prolonged creative endeavor.
For example.
This might be writing a short story, working on a really complex puzzle, or maybe just delving into an intensely detailed, dense book that requires your complete focus.
And this is a pillar of the solitude model. It must be done specifically without any commercial intent.
That's the rule. This is the act of non-productive creativity in its purest form.
The joy of creation for its own sake. The only audience is you.
Right. And when you engage in this kind of deep focus, you can activate what psychologists call a flow state, which these sources identify as a profound rest mechanism.
Why is that restful?
Because it allows the conscious mind to settle on a single complex task, which effectively silences the constant chatter of the weekly to-do list.
I see. And the pace of sensory enjoyment continues through Sunday.
It does. That day is often reserved for culinary experimentation.
A deliberate, mindful task that engages the senses without external pressure.
Exactly. Baking that complex 4-hour loaf of sourdough or trying a really demanding new recipe is restorative because it requires focused physical action and it delivers a tangible, immediate, non-monetary reward.
It's the antithesis of the rushed weekday meal you eat over the sink.
It is. And finally, there's the essential bookend to this period of internal focus.
Which is?
A long, meandering, destinationless walk to clear the mental cobwebs.
The key being destinationless.
Absolutely. This physical movement, paired with a lack of a specific destination or time constraint, allows your subconscious mind to process and integrate the week's information. It's not exercise.
It's mobile meditation.
That's a great way to put it. The goal is to feel thoroughly rested, mentally decluttered, and internally organized by Sunday night.
Okay, now let's pivot entirely because the second archetypal model is the complete antithesis of that.
It is. This one defines its rest by craving vibrancy and communal connection.
So who is this model for?
This model is for the person whose week was solitary. Perhaps they spent most of it in front of a screen, dealing with abstract concepts, lacking human spontaneity and physical energy.
So they need to recharge through stimulation, not sedation.
Precisely. If the first model seeks restoration through quiet and complexity, the second model seeks it through high-energy input. The driving force here is spontaneity and thriving on communal energy. This is the extrovert's recharge cycle.
They don't need to slow down.
No, they need to break the monotonous loop of their weekday life with novel experiences and human connection.
Spontaneity is the engine then. What are the specific elements of this kind of ideal weekend?
It might include a last-minute decision, An impulsive road trip to the coast after seeing a good weather forecast.
Or checking out a new gallery exhibition just because the mood suddenly struck.
Yes, there's a deliberate avoidance of overly regimented schedules. Because for this person, regimentation feels like work.
And the centerpiece, the communal part.
It's often hosting a dinner party, maybe a sophisticated soiree, with lively debate.
So it's not just passive consumption of food.
Not at all. It's active engagement with friends. The vibrancy comes from the exchange of ideas, the energy of conversation, the challenge of defending a position, and even navigating social etiquette in a celebratory setting.
This requires a lot of social energy.
It requires high social energy, but that energy is reinvested and returned, leaving them feeling charged, not drained.
This sounds absolutely exhausting to the solitude personality. Of course.
But for the communal individual, the desired outcome isn't feeling rested in that traditional sleepy sense.
No, it's feeling stimulated and fully alive. They thrive on input and connection. And that social exchange is what refreshes their mental state. It breaks the inertia of the isolated weekday.
So when we look at these two approaches side by side,
we recognize that they are two very different yet entirely valid methods of achieving what you might call psychological homeostasis.
and the synthesis here is crystal clear. These models show us that the optimal weekend is deeply, fundamentally personalized.
It has to be. It must serve either restoration, which is characterized by that slow tempo and quiet flow state,
Or stimulation, characterized by vibrancy and communal connection.
and it depends entirely on the individual's core needs following the demands of their specific week.
So the key is self-awareness.
Yes, what we could call diagnostic leisure. You have to ask yourself, am I suffering from chronic social overload, which requires the prescription of solitude and cocooning? Or am I suffering from mental depletion and routine exhaustion, which requires new input and high-energy connection to break the pattern?
The perfect weekend is simply the one that directly addresses the deepest deficiency you carried home on Friday afternoon.
And the power comes from that intentional diagnosis.
It does.
It transitions the weekend from being just a passive default state to being an active strategy. And that recognition that the weekend must be an intentional treatment plan for the week brings us to our final conclusions about the weekend as a mindset.
Right.
We started this deep dive talking about these enormous cultural forces that threaten leisure, and we're ending it by reclaiming the conceptual space of the weekend.
Not just physically, but mentally.
Exactly. The overarching conclusion we can draw from all the source material is that the weekend is not just a block of time, it is fundamentally an intentional mindset.
And that mindset is built, it's reinforced, and it's expressed through our language, and most importantly, through our deliberate choices. Throughout this dive, we've gathered these specific language examples that demonstrate this advanced, nuanced way of viewing our downtime. We're moving past vague, generic terms.
Think about the progression of clarity we've achieved. We moved from just saying, I had fun, to these advanced expressions that reveal deep psychological intent.
Right.
We talked about seeking a visceral thrill, that active pursuit of an intense, non-digital experience that truly breaks the monotony.
We discussed navigating social etiquette, which acknowledges the complexity of communal interaction as its own form of stimulating engagement.
And crucially, we defined the goal: mitigating burnout.
Yes, and we provided the contrasting methods, like the strategy of cocooning at home for internal restoration.
Versus the required energy of hosting a soiree for external stimulation. Each of those phrases contains a wealth of meaning about intentionality.
It proves that we can articulate our deep needs with real precision.
And this connects directly back to you, the learner. Just as finding the right words gives nuance to your language and helps you express complex ideas.
Finding the right strategic activities gives nuance to your personal well-being.
The challenge, in life and in language, is finding the nuance required to fully express and fulfill your personality. Not just through what you say.
But through the deliberate, non-optimized structure of your actions.
That structure is your defense. It's your defense against the constant pressure of external demands.
And if we return one last time to hustle culture and the mindset of toxic productivity, we have to pause and consider the final provocative thought.
Here is the challenge we want to leave with you. It's one that questions the very metrics of success we use to judge our own free time.
If societal pressure, through that side hustle mandate, demands productivity even in your leisure time, how do you measure the true success of a weekend?
Is it measured by the external output you created? The dollar amount you earned from the commercialized hobby? The fully organized garage? or the checked box on the self-improvement to-do list.
Or yeah, is success measured entirely by the internal metric?
That essential mental clearing of the mental cobwebs, the reduction of cognitive load, that genuine unquantifiable decompression that allows for future quality input and, frankly, higher quality work later.
What steps today are required to truly reclaim your time and ignore the hustle, to allow yourself the radical, non-productive choice of simply being?
Without judgment, without monetization, and without obligation.
That is the mindset shift that guarantees a genuine deep dive into rest.
And that is where we leave you, Tamal. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into leisure and productivity.